Okay, so my name is Tony Tang, and today is August 3rd, 2016, and the project is called Keepers of the Flame, and the main goal of this project is to capture the life of Japanese American pioneers who resided in the San Gabriel Valley pre and post World War II. So, welcome, and the first question is, or please state your full name and please spell out your full name.
My name is Toshiko Oda, Toshiko Oda.
When and where were you born?
I was born in San Francisco, August 14, 1926.
1926. Please tell me the name of your parents.
Seikichi and Naoko Ebihara.
Would you mind spelling that for me?
Seikichi, Seikichi, and Naoko, Naoko Ebihara.
And tell me about your parents or your family background.
I have they came from to San Francisco. They met in San Francisco, but they're both from Japan. My mother, and both of them are in the Tokyo region of Japan. They came at separate times. My mother's father came earlier, about 1900, right after the earthquake, which might be 1907. Yes, and he's been there. And when my mother was about 19, he asked them to come to America, so to join him. But there was a long separation, and she and her mother and her sister came to America to join my grandfather. And my father, actually, he was a teenager, and his home life wasn't such that he liked it very much. He became his mother passed away when he was 5 years old, and it separated the three children, and his childhood wasn't a very happy childhood, and he ran away. Not maybe ran away, but he was on a ship as a cabin boy, and through that he landed, and the captain was like he wanted to turn his back away from him so he could have a chance to escape. It was almost like not a conspiracy, but a quiet thing where he decided that he ought to do that. It gave him a chance to become. Eventually, he got his citizenship, which he was very proud of. But that's how he landed in San Francisco. And
what about your mother?
My mother came on a student visa, and she went to a school nearby, a grammar school, but she didn't stay with it very long. Mm-hmm.
And why did your mom decide to come to America?
Because my grandfather, wanted them to come. So, they got their visa, or no, what is it? Passport and everything in order, and they came the orderly way.
So your grandfather made the decision to immigrate.
Yes.
To America. And who provided money for transportation?
To come to America? My grandpa. Yes.
That's the same for your father?
And my father, like I said, he was the ship's captain. Made it easy for him to, I have, no clue as to what I'm talking about. But he was, how some people are more verbal and tell you everything. He kind of kept it to himself. That's what I figured out later.
And how was the health of everyone when they immigrated to America? Was anyone pregnant through the journey?
What did you say again?
How was the health of everyone?
Everybody was in good shape, yes.
Was anyone pregnant during the journey?
No.
You say your dad arrived in San Francisco, and where did your mother arrive in?
San Francisco also.
San Francisco as well.
Right.
And who greeted them when they arrived?
My grandfather, and they came at different times, so I don't know who greeted my father. I'm sure he had some friends there in San Francisco and actually he worked at a haberdashery. That's an old-fashioned word, and people that came from Japan, they weren't dressed in the custom American clothes, and that's what they landed in to. And I don't think they met each other then, but that was his job in a store where they gave their people that are, immigrants with new American shoes, clothes.
What about your mother?
I mean, that's what I'm telling you. My mother went to one of those places to get American clothes. Yeah. In San Francisco. Yeah.
And did your father live in San Francisco when they arrived here, or was it just a place for them to land and then they moved somewhere else?
No, I think he lived in San Francisco at the time.
For how long?
I have no clue, but after they got married, like I said, I have an older brother, so it was about 1926 that they lived in San Francisco, because after I was born in 1926, then they came to Southern California.
And what was their financial resources when they arrived?
They had no income as far as my grandmother arriving, but because my grandfather was working in a orchard in Watsonville, I think, he had income, and that's where they stayed. Yeah.
And your father?
And my father, working at the haberdashery, and also I think he worked in the summertime in the prune, citrus and that kind of farm communities.
And did they immediately find housing to rent or buy?
I think it wasn't that difficult, but there was a Japanese community in San Francisco, and I think they had a little apartment. In fact, when I went to San Francisco with my uncle just to visit, it had been raised, but a Japanese community center took up part of that area where my father and my mother had an apartment on Gary and whatever. But it's how it's not permanent. It's everything gets into something else, and it was where they had a Japanese community center there, I think.
Well, what about your mother?
What about her?
Did she find immediate housing to rent or buy?
No, she stayed with the family, So I think she never told me that it was difficult for her to find an apartment or this or that. But maybe if you were to ask my grandpa, he'll have but he's long gone. Yes.
And how long did they stay in their first home?
In their first home after they got married? Well, I'd just say maybe about 3 years. It's just the fact that they got married, and my brother was born, and I was born, so I'm just assuming it's about 3 years' time. Then they came to Southern California.
In 1926.
Yes.
So how long did you stay in their house here in San Gabriel?
We moved a lot. So I don't, in those days, truck farmers, you couldn't lease it. They were just short periods of time when they were raising crops, and some of the things, you had to plow under and start all over again almost. So it seemed like they were not real stationary farmers.
Well, where was their first house exactly when they arrived in Southern California?
Let's see. I have no clue actually to tell you where, because we lived in Pasadena, one of the places, San Gabriel, and South El Monte. I went to school in near Compton. I can't remember the name of that city that was. And we did live in near 36th and Western in LA at one time too. Here and there, I'll tell you so many places we lived.
Remember what street the house was on in Pasadena?
Green. I thought it was on Green Street. Oh, and also at another time, when we first came down, I think we lived on a place. My mother thought, she said, in Japanese, she'll say Hammond, like Hammond, Hammond. But I feel like it was near the Rose Bowl area. Yeah. But there's no place like permanence in my head. You know how some people have their old homestead or whatever, they go home. Japanese people too in Japan. But I felt very much, traveled.
Who helped them find a job here?
My uncle and some people, my friends, my father's friends that originally lived in San Francisco, relocating to Southern California. But I can't tell you just exactly who they were. Their names were like Sato, Gensang, but I don't know if that's a last name or his first name. Yeah. You should be having this interview with my mom. She passed away in 1980.
And who helped your mother find a job?
In those days, my mother, it wasn't like, oh, I have to find a job, because, she was staying home with the kids, and it was a handful, and so it didn't, it wasn't, how some people went out to do work. My mother, I remember staying home, housewife.
And what did your parents do for a living?
Like I said, he was in the earlier stages raising us. I think he was working in the grocery store, at the produce section, grocery stores. And then later on, he was truck farming.
And around what year when he worked at the grocery store and as a truck driver?
I can't exactly say what it was, changing here and there, so I can't say he stopped here and did this, it wouldn't be the truth, because I wouldn't, be particularly. It doesn't come into my head.
Well, how old were you? How old were you?
At this time that I'm talking to you about?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have no clue what, I don't understand what you mean.
How old were you when you were, when you remember your father being,
Truck farming?
Yeah, truck farming.
Well, he was doing truck farming till we started, we had to evacuate. Yeah. Which would be about 1940.
And what other relatives did you have contact with growing up?
What kind of contact?
What other relatives did you have in contact with growing up?
My uncle and auntie and the family, and my grandpa and my grandma, and those are the two relatives that we had. My father's side was all in Japan. Yes. And they were farmers. Like my father was like truck gardening. You know what truck gardening is?
Can you explain?
Well, it's like not a real big acreage of land, but to me, a truck gardener raises vegetables and takes it to the market, produce Grand Central or whatever. And I guess they were all truck gardeners, but maybe some people just say farmers. That's another word then.
Were there any other relatives that lived in the area as well?
They did live, both of them, grandma and grandpa and my uncle and aunt, did live in San Gabriel area, El Monte.
Did you see them often growing up?
Yes, I did, actually. Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about your grandparents?
They were, they never did take to becoming, fluent in American customs or speech. They kind of tended to be old Japanese.
Can you tell me more about them?
Say that again?
Can you tell me more about them?
My uncle had a vegetable stand in El Monte, and he raised a few of his vegetables there, but he also went around the local farmer, to pick up other vegetables because, he just couldn't have enough vegetable on the stand varieties, so that was one of the things he did, was using the local vegetables plus his own into having a vegetable stand, to sell retail. Yeah, just the vegetables. And my grandfather was raising strawberries. And he also had a stand during the summertime, selling the strawberry, as we did too. But it was seasonal. So in between, my father raised vegetables to take to the market.
Well, what was your grandfather like?
I don't remember him as being really, the kind of a grandpa that hugs you. Very quiet, and I just accepted him the way he was, which was more reserved than your idea of a jolly old grandpa.
What about your grandmother?
My grandmother was kind and quiet. That's all I remember.
What stories did you hear about your earlier ancestors from who you never knew?
Say that again?
What stories did you hear about your earlier ancestors that you've never met?
My early ancestors that I never met. Well, my father, like I said, lost his mom when he was 5 years old. But I think my grandpa was a nice, and he tried to get together with us, although we never were able. My father was never able to go back to Japan to visit him because of circumstances that he was too busy raising kids, and by the time war ended, I don't know if he had passed away or whatever. We lost some contact with him, and what's sad is that he finally, after the war, he thought he contacted his brother. The three children were, because they lost their mother, were into different families, and in the summertime they tried to get the three kids together, so they didn't grow up, if you have your siblings right next to you, you're always in contact, you're arguing and having the usual childhood. So it was precious in the summertime to get together. So here he finally thought he found his brother, so he was going back to Japan to meet him. And on the bus, he mentioned it to the bus driver about finally going to see his brother. Then he said, "Oh, he passed away the week before." Isn't that sad? But when I hear about all the conflicts and troubles that all the other countries had during the World War, and here and there, politics and cruelty, losing relatives, it's nothing compared to that. I think of our family undergoing camp and being able to come back irregardless of the wrongs done to us. Yeah. You don't have to write all this, but I'm telling you. How about your family? Do you have a lot of people that were in the revolution or got stuck here or there?
No, actually.
No. I'm reading a book right now, Taiwan. And I always wanted to know about that time when there was a conflict with China and Mao revolution, and how Chiang Kai-shek escaped to Taiwan. But the people in Taiwan really suffered. And even as I have my granddaughter married to a Chinese, and he's Taiwanese, from China, I'm reading about the wrongs that they had inflicted on the people. But Taiwan's history goes way back. They were always subjugated by other countries, Japan and and then there's the Aborigines. They're the original, like Indians. They have no much strength or power. It's always another country subjugating them. Yeah.
So that's colonization for you, huh? How many children were in your family, and where were you in the lineup?
My oldest brother, Rio, and then Toshiko, and then Sadako, and then Mitsuo, and then Keiko. 5 of us. My brother Rio passed away quite early. I don't know what year that was, 1983, somewhere around there.
How do you spell his name?
Rio. Well, my mother would say Rio, R-Y-O, but the way we pronounced it was R-I-O, Rio. And Keiko, we spelled it K-A-Y instead of a K-E-I, Keiko. She didn't appreciate that. She said she would have been, on the birth certificate, she would have rather read K-E-I. But at the time we were, registering her, we thought it'd be easier, Americanized K-A-Y-K-O.
And where were you in the lineup?
Second.
And what were your siblings like? And who are you closest to?
The siblings, we were two girls, dominated Uncle Missy, the third child, But he was very quiet, and we didn't have horrible things because he didn't retaliate. So we more or less went like this to him, but he's a real sweet brother, yeah. And my sister Keiko came along, but because she came along so late and that we didn't have much of a childhood together, because by the time I was about 15, Keiko might have been about 1 year old, yeah.
And what were your other siblings like?
My sister's bossy, but then if you don't have a childhood like that, where you grow up doing all the stuff that kids do to each other, there's some kind of you lose that bonding also, I feel like. And I feel like that's what my father didn't have, that his childhood was lonely because of the fact that they lost their mother, and I think the stepmother had a daughter after his father got married, and I think she had wanted to think that eventually they would get married, but it wouldn't have been for love, and so there was a lot of conflict there. And my father and my mother married because they wanted to get married, but a family, when you go way into the back, I have no clue what I'm talking about except what my mother and my father didn't talk too much about that kind of thing. I think my mother thought it was that there was a lot of hurts in his life.
Can you describe the house you grew up in?
The house that I grew up, very modest, and like I said, I can't say where I lived actually. It wouldn't be a truth, because I lived a little bit here and a little bit there, and it wasn't like the permanence of anywhere. So just before the war, we lived in a house that my grandfather was living in. It was very, what do you call it? It was an old farmhouse, I guess. Old farmhouse, and it came with the land, and oh, I know what. It had a Japanese furo. You know what a furo is? It's galvanized. In Japan, it would be a little different. Furo, maybe it would be wooden, and you put hot water in it and soak. But it was a great big old galvanized tub that you heated water from underneath with wooden, what is it? Driftwood, not driftwood, but something to heat up the water. And it was fun going in there. There's a wooden plank so you won't burn yourself. Sinking way down. Have you had experience going into a tub like that?
Unfortunately, no.
No.
And what city was this house in?
San Gabriel. Near San Gabriel Boulevard and Garvey. Right under the Edison line.
Can you say that this house in San Gabriel would be the most memorable house that you lived in?
Well, that's the house that I lived in just before we went to camp. And so I feel like my disruption was at that time. So there was no time when I said, oh, I lived here for 10 years and 20 years here. I can't say that, because it's not the truth. So that's where we lived till we were, I know, there was a water tank there. And it belonged to the Monterey Park Water District. And because the war started, and the hysteria of it all, they thought we might poison the water or something. They told us to evacuate right away, and originally we would have landed in Pomona Assembly Center, but because they wanted us to move, we took whatever belongings we could and lived in Nihonjimachi, which is Japanese town, and stayed in a hotel over there till there was evacuation orders. They had a plan to say, you people that live in San Gabriel go to Pomona Assembly Center. But because we moved once, we waited for the Japanese Tokyo Center area, and we got our orders to go to Santa Anita. Yeah, so even as we should have landed in Pomona Assembly Center because of that short move before. Remember that? I don't know if have you read a lot about that during that time when people were going into assembly centers?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Yeah, so we went into, so that Nihonjimachi was ordered to go to Santa Anita Assembly Center, and then from there we went to Heart Mountain, Wyoming.
Can you describe the room you lived in?
Where?
In San Gabriel, the house?
The house?
Mm-hmm.
It was very, I can't even remember actually, because it was just bare essentials. There was a bed, and there must have been a drawer, but to me, I have no, right now I can see what everything is in every room, but I am clueless as to where things were. It didn't make that much impression on me, like, oh, I remember but I remember sharing a bed with my sister. Yeah, that's one thing. We always had a bed, but I never had a bed of my own because I slept with the same, with my sister, younger sister Sadako.
How many rooms were in the house?
Maybe two. My parents' bedroom and another room for the kids.
What were your family's economic circumstances, and do you remember any times where money was tight? And do you remember having to do without things that you wanted or needed?
Well, I didn't realize that at that time there was a big depression on in America. And there was a lot of pickup trucks coming by with people loaded down with all kinds of stuff. They were, white people. And we lived in an area where already it was not economically, it was hard times. And I have no clue how much my father made or why, but, he did. I remember him worrying about paying for the truck if it got disabled. Going to the mechanic to pay, and I don't know how much it was, but how much he was discussing it with my mother, how he was going to make the payments to repair a truck. So it was not fun for my father, I'm sure. But as far as, I couldn't tell you just exactly how much he made or why. But I think some years were better than others, raising strawberries. But it's a seasonal thing, so, there's good times and then it goes down and you have to,
Do you remember having to do without things that you wanted or needed?
Do
without things that you wanted or needed, in terms of what you can buy, what you want to buy, but you can't have it because of certain
I think
economic...
We didn't have the luxury of watching, we went to the movies, but there was no forceful thing like TV, and because we lived so isolated from house to house, like in the suburbia, I had no clue that other kids had this or that or anything. But I remember getting a bicycle, And that, my sister keeps on insisting, is because my father wanted us to come home early to help him on the farm. And that wasn't because he wanted us the pleasure of having a nice bicycle. But I remember earlier having roller skates and being terrible at it and landing on my butt every time I came to a corner because I didn't know how to stop. But if you lived in a neighborhood where, like my husband Fred, he lived in Boyle Heights, and he had lots of kids to play with. I didn't have anybody except that's another thing that's really odd. When you're in the farm community, unless you go to church and have that kind of stuff for picnics and things get together, the kids are more or less isolated right in that family. So you did play a lot with your kids, your own family. Yeah.
Alright, so we've reached the 30-minute mark of the interview. So how about we take a 5-minute break and then we'll reconvene and we'll just finish it up then.
Just take a break?
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.